Hello, everyone at Main Public School. Never know whether to add the upper in there, but in my mind, your main upper, maybe public school. My name is Katrina Kavanagh, and I'm the Chief Empathy Officer of Kindness on Purpose. And I've been connected to your school now for a number of years, and I really love your school and your school community. I've been up to visit you several times. There might be parents and carers who don't know me because your kids have just started over the last couple of years, but I have been up there and really enjoyed the experience of being in the Valley of the Rainbows and being of support to what I consider to be a very special community, to be honest. I am coming to you today and I'm providing an information session to parents and carers and also the teachers, just to share with you some ideas, some information, and hopefully some steps that you might be able to take to help you help your kids, but also, of course, help yourself, because we don't do much if we're not looking after ourselves. I wanted to start by saying that I kind of wanted to recognize where you're at. And I wanted to begin by saying, in no way do I know exactly as a person what it's like to feel what you're feeling, to experience what you're experiencing. I've not gone through a natural disaster where I've been personally affected before. So that's something I can tell you. I don't know that. I do know, as a human on the planet, I of course know what it's like to experience trauma and grief. And of course, as you know, as a clinician working with people over the last 27 years, I have obviously accumulated some knowledge and experience working alongside and being there and supporting people who've experienced a range of life's events, including natural disasters. And so the first thing I wanted to acknowledge is, first, that I haven't been through it myself. I have supported people in that experience before. And then obviously I've worked in trauma extensively over those 27 years. What I also wanted to acknowledge is that you have been working tirelessly and really impacted now for a very long time by these floods. And I wanted to recognize that. And I wanted to recognize the knowledge and expertise that you have organically developed or perhaps brought to this situation based on your lived experience so far. So kind of acknowledging the body of experience and knowledge and skills that are already in the room per se, or in our shared space here online. I also wanted to acknowledge that this week represents the return to Main Public School, the actual site or the grounds, as I refer to them. And, you know, I am very aware that that brings so many layers of emotion. The first and most obvious one that we would all think that you could be feeling is a sense of relief, a sense of elation, and perhaps even excitement to be returning back to what is familiar. I am aware, though, that it would be very, very normal, and that this is what I'm wanting to do, is just to normalize some things for you. It would be very normal for actually feelings of anxiety to increase this week, because sometimes just being on site and being back up in the valley, it can be a trigger in itself. There's also so I would expect higher levels of anxiety. It wouldn't surprise me if yourself and your children are having thoughts, or maybe a form of intrusive thoughts, or we might call them worries, and maybe running some scenarios in your mind of, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if this happens? Those kind of thoughts are really, really normal. And so I wanted to recognize that. And isn't it funny how we can experience two seemingly opposing emotions at the same time? So we can be experiencing delight and relief and maybe even some excitement and joy about returning back to the grounds. And yet at the same time, we can be experiencing some varying levels of worries and anxiety. And of course, that gets expressed in different ways. I noticed that on the Main Facebook page, that on the second day, this week, which is, and I just had it clarified, it was the second day, you had further rain, as we are down here. And the causeway was starting to flood, if I've read that correctly and understood it correctly. And so I was curious about, what that meant for people, what that meant for your children, and what it meant for yourselves and what it meant for the community. So I was curious about that. The other thing that I am aware of and I wanted to acknowledge is that when we have situations like this, we have our own individual response as parents and carers. We are witnessing and experiencing our children experiencing the impact of unexpected and sudden trauma, that is the floods and what's going on. And so we have our own experience. We have, as an individual person, we then have our experience of parenting or being a carer for children. So we have the vicarious, in that way, experience of our kids. And then we have the feeling of being in the community as well. And they are three very, very distinct layers. And I just want to show you something here. I always use I don't like to use I like to use a whiteboard with you guys. I don't like to use the PowerPoints because even though they're neat, I feel like this is a much more organic way to present. So if we think about the layers, you've got yourself. Can you see? So that's you. And then you've got your 1, 2, 3, 4, however many children you have. And then and then you've also got whoever else is in your family unit. Okay, who it might be one other person, might be no other people, might be two, your partner, extended family. And then all of you sit in a broader community of other families, other people, other businesses, right? Now, I know you know this, but understanding the systemic way that trauma moves in and out of our own little systems, our own little worlds, is really, really important, because we know that you can be experiencing your own experience. You're then feeling the need to be supportive, of course, and be there. I don't mean like that, as in be there, of course, authentically, for the children, those who are in your care. You're also then experiencing what's coming back from the way, whoever your child experiences the trauma. Okay. You're then, of course, leaning in the best you can and wanting to support the loved ones in your family. Okay. And then also you're on the receiving end of however they're experiencing their emotional state as you make your way through this. Then there's another layer, of course, of wanting to give support to the broader community, but then also getting influenced by what's going on in the broader community. So you can see it's a process of giving and receiving the effect. Now, I draw this because, as you can see, what began as a very simple experience of you is quite complex with lots of different layers, and we are affected by who we are around and how we are all experiencing as a collective. And that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to come in and provide some support, because when a individual suffers, it's one thing, but when a community suffers, the dynamics are very different. Because when an individual suffers, we go to others in our community for support. But when a community itself suffers, the very people that we would normally lean into and go to for support are actually very affected by what's going on. So everyone is depleted, and everyone is affected. So I just wanted to acknowledge that level of complexity. And look, a lot of this is making statements of really, really obvious things that you already know, but sometimes it's really, really refreshing, and it can feel light to have someone come and say, yes, you are experiencing that, and this is why. Okay, let's state the obvious, but let's all in that process validate what you're actually experiencing. I also then wanted to talk about things like what it's like to experience emotion around trauma. So let's talk about what could be happening with your children. What we know is that most people, when they experience trauma, they there's a myriad of ways that we manage, but essentially, very broadly, and it's very, very broad, it gets broken down into two types of ways of experiencing and what we call expressing our distress. Okay, because for absolutely certain, when we experience, so there's a maths equation. I better do the maths equation first. Anyone who knows my work has heard me say this. Okay, it's absolutely certain. It's not a matter of will you be affected by this. It's a matter of course you are. And this equation I use here is to demonstrate that, in fact, you're not weak. No one here is weak. No one here. And in fact, if you're the one in the family or one in the community who's the strong one, you're even more on my radar, because it's often the strong ones who are so affected. So let's talk about A plus B equals C. So this is an equation I use to explain how trauma impacts us as human beings. So we start with A, which is a trauma or a traumatic event, okay, or a moment of distress or worry. And B is a human being, right? So if we add A plus B, we get C. So if we add the trauma and a human being, if you put those two things together, we absolutely 100% every single time, there are no exceptions, get C. And C is, I'll write it down here, C is a human being, okay, affected by trauma. Okay, B is a human being affected by trauma. Sorry, wrong letters. Forgive me. C is a human being affected by trauma. Now, I say this because some of us can be pretty unkind to ourselves, and we can say, I should be stronger. I should be, the shoulds, anyone who's done a basic work on themselves would know about the shoulds. I should be stronger. I shouldn't be responding this way. I need to be stronger for the community, for my children, for myself, all those shoulds. So the first thing we need to do as parents and carers is to really be kind to ourselves, and give ourselves a little break and understand that this is the science. This is not Katrina's making it up as she goes along. This is the science. It's very clear, if you are a human being and you're exposed to trauma, you will be affected by it. Now, what happens is there are a few different, like I said, there's a myriad of ways that people respond, but essentially it comes down to, by people, I mean humans, I mean your children and yourself. It comes down to two ways of expressing. We all find ways, the body and brain will always find a way to express the distress, okay? Because if you think about it, when on a very basic scientific level, the body is always in a state of healing, right? So if they get a cut, it goes into healing mode. It's the same thing for trauma. The moment you are affected by trauma, the brain and the body says, right, I need to get you safe. I need to get you safe. We need to get safe. We're unsafe. We need to get safe. How are we going to get safe? Well, I need to, and then it starts working through the impact and through symptoms, starts expressing the distress. So, so we have two different ways. There's externalizing and internalizing. We might externalize, or we might be, I've actually written it two different ways. Externalizing, remember, anyone who's known me knows whiteboarding and spelling isn't my thing. So we've got externalizing is one way distress and trauma gets expressed, and then there's internalizing. So examples of externalizing are obviously the really obvious. So you might find that you are more, and this is you and your children. So this is more the explosive out behaviors. Okay, so it's things like yelling more, feeling agitated, reacting more, all of those things. It might be, it might be, so it may even be physical. Okay, so you might find your children, for example, becoming more physical with their distress. So they might be hitting more, they might be hurting more other kids, Now with adults, we can sometimes know why we are in a state of distress and why we are heightened. With children, though, They don't often come up and say, they may, but they don't often come up and say, hey, mum and dad, carer, just letting you know that I'm having a sensory experience here where I'm feeling really triggered. And so as a result of, that's why I went over and whacked my sister. Okay, just letting you know that's what they don't do that. They have a meltdown. They'll have a big moment of the big expressed emotion over the fact that the little sister wouldn't share the pink crayon or whatever the topic of the day is. And they have the big feeling about that. Okay, so it's often with children, and it's often things that you think, why would they get upset? I mean, we've got this big thing going on of the, why are they getting upset over the orange juice or the pen or the whatever it is, right? But that's the way children do it. They just find ways through their everyday play where interactions happen, and for example, and you might notice high rates of conflict. Okay, now, so this expressing out through maybe shouting or yelling or being physical, hurting objects, hurting, maybe even more physical with other people. That is something that we would expect in children, and sometimes this does also happen with adults. Now, may I say, can I encourage anyone who is not managing and not coping, and maybe finding that the way they're expressing their distress are in some of those ways. Obviously, you've got all the resources that you may have already. Let me know if you need more. But the key place to contact would be 1-800-RESPECT. They will put you on the path of where to go. Okay, 1-800-RESPECT. You can go online and search them up, or you can have a look on your phone. You can ring them. The other, as in type in 1-800-RESPECT. I'm assuming you've got some flood helplines, but also obviously it's going to your GP as well and having a talk to them about getting some help. Okay. Now, the other way that people do express their distress is they internalize. And this is where you find kids or yourself become really, really quiet. They suddenly become even more trying to do the right thing. They're the kids that you say, look, we've just gone through something. Are you okay? And they're like, no, I'm good. No, I'm happy. Good. Yeah, great. No, good. Maybe not like that, but they'll say, yeah, no, I'm good. I'm okay, Mum. I'm fine. I'm fine. It's like, we've just been through something. So, and Katrina said the science is A plus B equals C. So you're a human being. So actually you are going to be affected by what's going on. And so even though you might tell me you're fine, the science says you're not, or you're affected at least, right? And then, so we need to be aware of that. And so also we'll find with those children and adults that they're more the internalizers, the ones that shove their feelings down, are more likely to be the people who are being there for others, right? And now some people do in the alternate industry, some people refer to those people as empathic or empaths. And that's a valid way to describe those people. And I'm not saying if you are an empath that you're definitely shoving it all down. I'm not saying that, but that can happen, and it can take the form of being quite empathic. And basically the carers, right? The carers, the people that are being there. And in children, we see that in a state where they try to be older than their years, and they try to be, like it's called parentified in the field, but they try to be like the little parent and be the one that looks after everyone, or they may be the older sibling and they try to look after their other siblings. And look, there's lots of strengths in that as well, but we know that is also a stress response to what's happened. Okay, so that's a general overview of what we would expect. What I would say to you is, whatever your child and your usual coping strategies or way of responding to distress, when we've had such a significant event, it's normally an exaggeration of that. So if you are normally someone who internalizes and likes to focus on the feelings of others as a way of coping with your own distress, then you're probably more likely to do more of that. And that there's a lot of strength in that. They're the helpers in our community. But for those people, we need to support them to take more time for themselves, which we'll be talking about. But then also, if your child or yourself is more of an externalizer, then you will be feeling more agitated. You will be more reactive. Your child will be more reactive. They will be more agitated. So just be aware that when we have trauma around, it's usually an exaggeration of the way that people normally cope. Okay. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about is just a little piece on coping as parents, and then a little piece on what we can do for our kids. There's so much to tell you. I'm just sort of giving you a little brief summary, and I'm going to be back for subsequent sessions that are noted on the Facebook platform, the main public school Facebook platform, and that won't be recorded. So I'll be able to answer more questions in those sessions as well. And I'm really looking forward to that. So the things that we would be, like I said, expecting is big feelings either being shoved down or being externalized, or maybe a combination. The other thing then that we need to note is, well, how do we be good to ourselves as parents? Because it's always oxygen mask on first. We need to look after ourselves, and then we get to our kids. So the first thing I'd like you to do is be super kind to yourself and compassionate. And there are going to be days where we have an ideal about how we wish to be as parents and carers, and then we have the reality. And sometimes, some days, those two things are closer than others, right? So in a crisis, I would expect that, you know, we're often much more over here as far as how we wish to be as parents and how we're showing up and being able to be, because we're in a crisis. So I'd love you to be kind to yourself and be very compassionate, and please explain to yourself that whatever has happened, it's very, very understandable. Your reactions and your responses are very understandable. And, you know, as parents, sometimes we can be really cruel to ourselves because we can think things like, oh, I haven't been there as much for my children as I thought I would be. I've needed more rest, for example. I've needed to sleep more and I found myself doing that. Or I'm too busy finding the next place to live, for goodness sake, or, you know, managing the practicalities of what it is to be impacted. It is what it is, and know that this is one season in your life, and there will be another season. There'll be an opportunity for reconnection. There'll be an opportunity for the family to take a different shape yet again. And I think it's really important to, and that's actually one of the tips, is to be labeling and naming this up with your children and saying, okay, guys, we were in the season of impact of the floods. We're now in the season of what we would call recovery. And those recovery is practical. It's like, where do we live? You can see with the school, it's practically, you know, putting the grounds back together. It's all that building and laying of turf and putting your playground back together and putting your classroom back together. And they know the same at home. So in the phase of recovery, it can feel really busy. We can all feel really, really tired. And sometimes we might feel sad. We can feel very big, heavy feelings, because the kindness on purpose way is to talk about our feelings as either being light or heavy. So, you know, we can feel very, very heavy. You might feel very, very heavy, you know, in the morning. And then as a family, we might be feeling heavy in the afternoon. The family might be feeling quite happy, but you know, little Johnny, you might have a moment where you have a moment to yourself and you're feeling a bit heavy. And just understand that feelings are up and down. They're big, they're heavy. We can get some lightness in there as well. But it's normal to feel this way as we are in a state of repair. And then if you're giving yourself permission to be not perfect in your parenting as you're in the state of repair, then that will go a long way to really, really helping your kids as well. And it's role modeling to them that perfectionism is not the way to manage life events. So here we are, we've got your children responding or reacting, expressing their distress in the best way they can. And I'm really looking forward to hearing how that's actually happening in real life for you and your children, if you're comfortable with that in the subsequent sessions. Here to be of service. I'm here to be of service. So whichever way we need to run those sessions, I'll be guided by you and I'll facilitate accordingly. But let's talk about some things that you can do. Okay. Now, I'll be sending through to Pav the 4 coaching steps that we utilize here at Kindness on Purpose, because it's a really good, solid model. And because it's being reinforced in the school, you're going to get a consistent message right across. Okay. So the first step that we're going to be looking at is we're going to be asking the question, am I feeling heavy or light? Now, obviously, well, it could be actually it could be both, because kids are very good at playing through crises, as you would have noticed. And so they can have lots of light moments, okay? But if they're having the question is, are you feeling heavy or light? You're feeling heavy, right? So that's, if they're feeling light, then keep doing that. But if they're feeling heavy, then we need to look after the feelings, right? Now, what I would talk about is with your family, it's nice to start having conversations, like I said, normalizing the experience. Start using the language of course, we're having big feelings. It's understandable we're having big feelings, okay? It's understandable we're having times when we're feeling heavy, you know, labeling that, okay? And then the next question is, where am I feeling heavy? Okay, and the choices are head, chest, tummy, back, and throat. And what we're doing there is essentially tracking the vagal nerve, because from a neuroscience point of view, we know that emotion, of course, it's as Bessel van der Kolk speaks, that refers to it as, he's one of the world leading experts in trauma and recovery, and he speaks to it as the body keeping score. So we know that throughout this process, your child and yourself, your body has been keeping score. So we're going to start learning where in the body we feel the heavy feeling. So is it in your head? As you know, can feel very angry, and when we're feeling angry, we can feel a lot of pressure in our head. A lot of pressure and a lot of heat can be felt up there when we're feeling overwhelmed. Our chest can feel very tight and heavy when we're struggling and we're grieving, because there's a lot of grief in this as well, of course, basically living in a daily experience of grief, right? So we've got that feeling, that aching feeling in the chest. We have the upset, nervous feeling in our tummy, okay, and nausea. We have tension that rests in our back, and we can get the lump in the throat. Now, the throat, the chest, and the tummy are directly tracking the vagal nerve, okay? As is the head. And then also the back, as you know, is muscular, so it's storing tension. So we start training ourselves and training our children to know, is it head, chest, tummy, back, throat? And when I work with schools, I get them to chant that: head, chest, tummy, back, throat, head, chest, tummy, back, throat. And I would encourage you to do that with your family. The third step is because once we know where we're feeling our heavy feelings, head, chest, tummy, back, throat, we can then use practical strategies to work with those parts of the body to bring relief, just like you would if you had an upset tummy, and you might drink a chamomile tea to settle the tummy, if that's okay. Or if you have a tightness, or you might put a heat pack on your tummy. Or if you're hot and bothered and it's, you know, been a moment of heightened distress and big feelings, you might put, you know, we put an ice pack on the back of the neck, because that helps very, very much. So we use lots of different strategies. So it's where am I feeling it? Head, chest, tummy, back, throat. And then the third step is I can look after my heavy feelings. Right. And that is in the way of working physically with the body. Okay, and then the fourth step is, oh, my text is running out. Goodness me. The fourth step is, oh goodness, so I'm so sorry. So I can feel okay again. This texter was fine 2 days ago. Okay, now what you'll see here is that's the brief overview. You'll notice here I'm not getting the kids to talk about. I'm not getting kids to talk about what they're feeling. You know, and this is a good strategy. And what I'd like you to do is, if you've got a child who's actually having big, heavy feelings, and it might be over the pencil breaking or something, and you know that actually it's a heightened response that's due to the buildup of distress, okay, from what you're all experiencing, I'd like you to start with absolutely focus on what they report to be the issue. So, oh, okay, you're having heavy feelings about little Bobby breaking your pencil, or, you know, you've broken the pencil, or your brother or sister, you know, start there. and get in and you go through those steps. Now, when we get to step 3 and we're looking at, well, I can look after my feelings, that's all about, I'm going to send through, and I'm actually going to post, on Main Arm, a copy of the Kindness on Purpose 4 coaching steps. And that's where we have examples of what you can actually do. And I'll also make some notes on there for you. I can look after my heavy feelings. So that's where we're demonstrating to you and yourself, and it's very important, your role model. This is where we're showing what we're going to use, these physical strategies. So we're going to talk about a heat pack. I'm going to a hot water bottle. I'm going to talk about a cool pack like that they use in an injury when someone, like an ice pack, you may just get a washer, a flannel, as we might call it, or a towel, and wet it and put it across the back of the neck. A heat pack on the chest and tummy is very, very good. A cool pack, like I said, sorry, I'm repeating myself. There are other strategies like breathing techniques as well. But wherever your child is feeling, so you ask your child, you ask yourself, where am I feeling heavy? Is it in my head, my chest, my tummy, my back, and my throat? Now, most kids can tell you. If you have a child that can't tell you, what I would say to you is, I would love you to take a best guess. You're their parent or their carer. You know where they feel their feelings. I know you do. So even if you say, look, let's look after your feelings. Let's look after your tummy and your chest then, or just look after your chest. Now, if you get it wrong and they're actually feeling the heavy feelings with the lump in their throat, it's fine. It's about accessing the vagal nerve physically to give it a sense of relief, to we're actually stimulating it, but that's a different side story. But we're snapping it back into action. It doesn't matter where you access it, as long as we're accessing it. So the idea is to apply that physical strategy. There are other options. Like I said, you can get essential oil, for example, if that's okay. Put it in a carrier oil, rub it on the chest, rub it on the tummy. There's some stretching you can do. There's some pushing on the wall, not like a door frame or a solid wall, and basically putting every single bit of energy that you or your child has onto pushing on that wall in a concentrated way. That is a wonderful strategy as well for releasing the tension. Much better than whacking a ball or whacking things or whacking any of that. Maybe years ago they'd say for pent up emotion, they'd say go and punch a punching bag. No. We know that doesn't make a difference really. More pushing heavy objects, and so if you're on property and you can get your kids pushing safely things around, that's great. Or pulling's very good, just not on top of them so they get hurt, but you know what I mean. But if you haven't got that, pushing on a door frame or pushing on a solid wall, because you're using all of your energy, I wouldn't consider a usual wall, that's that plasterboard. No, because you might push a hole in it. But that pushing technique, so anything physical, is very good for kids who might experience their heavy feelings in their back, because it's in that muscle and in the tension. So there's a range of strategies I'm about to share with you online on the Facebook page when I share the poster later today. And so it's about applying those strategies so you can feel okay again. And they are the 4 coaching steps. Now, because you're all in a state of crisis, and I'll just finish with this because there's so much to tell you, but we've got a short time frame. I would be encouraging families, because you're going through a crisis, to actually to be sitting down once a day, ideally together, although I appreciate the busyness of things. And so look, we're all going to spend a few minutes looking after our feelings. And it might be while you're sitting there watching telly or looking at devices or reading a book, right? Or doing some drawing. You might get a heat pack or get a cool pack, get a cold washer, have a warm cup of tea, do some breathing techniques together, maybe do some mandala drawing. That's another way of working, and I can talk about that as well. So, these are things that we can do as a family all together. And as a family, sit down and say, we're doing this to look after our feelings. Might be listening to music, but what you're doing is you're on purpose intending that activity and that time to be, come on, we're looking after our feelings so we can feel okay again, so we can start to feel okay again. The language, being able to use that sentence, I'm doing this to look after my feelings so I can feel okay again. When you're with your children, darling, you're doing this to look after your feelings so you can feel okay again. We are doing this as a family so we can feel okay again. What we're aiming for here is a experience of post-traumatic growth. And post-traumatic growth only occurs when we have a sense of hope at the end, right? Now, there have been plenty of times where, as a collective community, as an individual, as a family, I'm certain your relationship with hope has been totally obliterated or at least strained. That's okay. It's okay to sometimes not have it. Okay. It's through the practice of teaching ourselves and teaching our kids that we can feel really, really heavy with big feelings. We can apply this strategy and we can get an internal physical shift where we get a bit of physical relief from the discomfort of the emotions that we're feeling. And we can therefore start to feel even a little bit, or hopefully a lot, okay again. When we can prove to ourselves and our body and our children that this is possible, this is how we start to be able to reconnect with hope. Because in that moment of giving our body a sense of relief, in those moments collectively over time of giving our body and our brain a sense of relief, what we're actually doing is we're building resilience, we're building confidence in our own capacity for emotional self-mastery, okay, emotional self-mastery. And then, of course, we can then bring the hope back in again. So this is a very, very brief initial talk. I am in conversation with Pav about maybe doing some course specifically for kids. I'm doing a course anyway for kids around anxiety. That's kind of going to come online soon. For families, sorry, on helping a course, more online, more detail, so we can methodically step through what this means. That's going to be happening. So anyone can access that, but I was wanting to do something a bit special for your school with that. And I'm in conversation with Pav about that. So there's that. There's resources I'm going to be popping up today, written resources that you can refer to that reinforces what we've spoken about this morning. And then I'm coming back at those scheduled times as noted on the Facebook page again. I hope this has been helpful. And I want you to really know that I very, very, very much care for you. And I'm here to be of service in whatever way I need to, utilising the skills, knowledge and resources that I've got to be of service to you and your community. Thank you very much.